So they went on in 2 pieces,
It's just for ice.
just for ice, that's all it was. Because without them,
Yeah, today they use plastic, you know, but it works great, man.
yeah, I know,
Lasts forever is what it does.
yeah,
You can't hurt it.
yeah,
Okay. All right. Can I use this picture for a few minutes?
sure.
Okay. We're going to try to do an introduction to a video right here, right now. We're back on our skiff project here again. Now, I've taken a week off, but I think I deserved it. We're back here, and I'm enthusiastic about getting working, so here we go. Now, I've ripped out some pieces of wood and clamped on some guards right here. These are the pieces I'm going to use, but I'm not going to go into that right now. What I want to do today is put lift rails on the boat. Now, I think I've talked to you about them before. They're going to be a set of rails that are going to be right down in this area down here. They're going to extend from forward about 14 feet aft and not go all the way aft. And the idea is to help, those rails help keep the bow of the boat up like in a following sea. Now, the boat's curved so much that I want to put 2.5 inches on there, and I can't bend 2.5 inches around there. So it's just going to put too much of a strain on the fastenings and things, especially at the end. So what I'm going to do is rip them down into 2 pieces. The pieces I'm going to work with are virtually the same size as this, so I'm going to rip them right down the middle, and we're going to have 2 pieces that are 1.25 inches or so square, and we're going to put them on individually. I'm going to bend the first one around and fasten them to the frames, and then I'm going to bend another one around on top of that and fasten that one to the first one. So it's pretty simple to do, really, and what we're going to do is make them a little different than some I've seen. Now here's a picture of a skiff that a friend of mine built, Mike Brennan. He's still building skiffs, and this was built quite some time ago. And you can see right here that it's got the lift rails on it like I'm describing. They're a little bit higher than the ones I'm going to put on. I think they put them up this high right here because they're well above the waterline here, and that way they don't foul up on the bottom. But when you paint the boat, you paint that rail just like you would paint the top sides the same color, and it's painted above the rail and below it. Well, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to lower them down quite a bit. They're going to be about 6 inches from the bottom of the boat, so they'll be right close to the waterline but not on it, and then rising up forward like that. And they're going to be parallel to the guards, so they'll be 16.5 inches below the guards. Very important. So we're going to move over to the table saw here and get ripping them out and get started. Now I've clamped a wooden leaf spring down on the table saw right here. It's made out of a piece of white oak, and it's kind of like 1/8-inch layers, and it's pretty flexible, but it's really pretty, it holds a nice pressure against the piece that I'm trying to rip, because the piece I'm trying to rip is not necessarily all that tame. You know, it's kind of curved in different directions, and you have to hold that pressure up there tight. It's like having another person with you, really. And so it makes it cooperate and makes it a lot easier. And I just open the front door right here and just push it right out the front door because we don't have a ton of space. I kind of use these 2 table saws right here like a workbench area as well as table saws because we have limited space. So this is how we kind of act in here when we're ripping this stuff out. Now that that's complete, we're going to actually put them on top of our little workbench area. Now the 2 table saws, like I said, they're right in the same spot. We haven't carried it across the shop or gone anywhere. And you can see that after we've ripped it, the 2 pieces have really got a set in them. They've sprung a lot. They'd be really difficult to smooth up those rips on a jointer or anything like that. Or I suppose you could run them through a planer, but you know, that's just another whole operation. They're just sitting right here, and what I'm going to do is just pick up a little electric plane, and I've got it adjusted perfectly so that it really skims off thousandths of an inch at a time, almost nothing. And I've got my eyes on the circular cuts that I've made so that I don't get past where those evidence of the ripping is. I'm not going to wreck it while I'm trying to fix it. So I'm actually springing the piece with one hand and holding the piece of wood in the other hand. And it looks a little bit dangerous, but I don't know, I've been doing it most of my life. So many skiffs in the past, we just ripped the pieces and put them on the boat. We weren't concerned about smoothing them up whatsoever, but this is kind of cool. So what if I made it 6 inches from the bottom all the way? You know what I'm saying? Yeah, let me try that. Let me just see what it looks like. Earlier, Zach and I took a batten and we wrapped it around there. He had one end and I had the other. And we were just trying to get a good look. All right, let's put it above, just below those marks. Not like that. I don't like it. Pick it back up again. So basically what I'm trying to do here is just establish where I'd like to put these lift rails, you know, and basically I would like the tail end of them, or from here back, to be about 6 inches above the water, because I don't want them to sit in the water when the boat is just sitting still. I'd like them to hover just a little bit above the water, and then I would paint the boat red, the bottom paint up to the lift rail, and from there up, you know, just the topside color, whatever color that might be. So, you know, I think 6 inches is the way I used to put them, all pretty much like that. And then what I've got going on here is I've made, now I'm going to follow the bottom back here, 6 inches, so it parallels the bottom. But when you kind of get to about here, I'm going to start paralleling the top. So you got 16.5 inches to the top of it, 16.5 inches to the top of it, and the same thing up forward. And that's the curvature I think we're going to put in it right there. If there's something wrong with that, let me know now. This is where we're going to start, right here. We're not going to run the lift rails all the way aft. There really isn't any use for them back there. So what we're going to do is start right here. This is about 14 feet long here. And I'm going to measure them up from the very bottom of the boat, 6 inches, and just put a little mark right there. That's going to be the top of the lift rail. Now I'm just going to move down and put a mark at every frame here. So now we know exactly where our lift rail goes, so we just shoot a bead of polysulfide in the back side of it. Now, it just seems to work out perfectly, just one bead right down the middle with hardly any effort whatsoever is the way to go. Then Zach and I are just going to take it over into position and just hold it right up in the marks without any clamps or anything, and shoot it with a countersink for the head of the screw, and then a tapered drill bit. And we've got some 3-inch screws here, galvanized, and I just blast those right in there with a bit brace, and then work our way along. And it happens kind of quickly. And then up forward, we just kind of winged it up into position, and we had that bead. We were all set to go. We didn't even know exactly where it was going to be yet. We could take another look at it and then shoot it where we wanted it and fasten it right on, and that takes care of that. So there's our first layer of the lift rail right in position and fastened on nice and tightly right into the frames with some pretty heavy screws, really. But we've already moved the front end of it once. I lifted it up about 1 inch, because after I looked at it, it took a couple of days of looking at it actually before I decided that it looked good or it didn't look good. But I finally decided, well, it didn't look good, so we moved it up forward a little bit, and I think it looks great right there. So we've drilled some holes from the outside into the inside of the boat. We're actually going to back fasten it from the inside, because we want that thing on there really tight. No matter what hits this thing, we don't want that first piece moving around. So we don't want it glued either. We just want it bedded on there and fastened. This boat is bedded and fastened together. It's not glued together. Now, the next thing we're going to do here is apply the next layer right around outside of that, and we're going to fasten it on from the outside in between these two pieces, and then probably up close to the other fastenings up forwards. Getting started with our second piece here, we've got a clamp already in position up forward, so we're going to thread it through that clamp and then just bend it around, and I'm going to put one clamp in the middle of it there, because it kind of wants to slide off right there, and then stretch it back, put it in position back aft, put one hole in it back aft, just pre-drill one hole in it, and we know that's exactly where we want to start. Now, I'm going to take it back down and put bedding compound on it. But when I go to fasten it back up there, I can't do it exactly the same way, because I wouldn't get it right where it belongs. So what I'm going to do is pick the after section up and fasten that on in that hole that I drilled right there. I might not have to tighten it all the way up, but I get it up there pretty close, and then I'm going to work my way forward from there. So now I'm going to push it in up forward and apply the clamps, one in the middle, and we're going to keep moving those clamps forward as we go and screwing it up tight, and then unsnap a clamp, move it up forward some more, put another screw, and just work our way all the way forward until we're done. And you can also grab the clamp and hold it nice and tight and wiggle it up and down, and that kind of makes that bedding compound squeeze out of there a little bit, so it doesn't rely on the screw quite so much to squeeze it up. Now there are both pieces of the lift rail on the starboard side fastened right up in position. We had to fasten them right up there because if you took your time and any of that bedding compound went off, then you'd have a hell of a time trying to get them up there nice and tight. So we can't let that happen. So this is where we've gotten so far. We've got to trim the forward end off and the after end as well, but we'll clean them up after the bedding compound dries, and I'm going to actually fasten them from the inside into the first piece, like I said before. That still has to be done, but I kind of like to tell you a little bit more about what these lift rails actually do and why you see them on here the way you see them. In my way of thinking, these things are to keep the bow of the boat up when you're in a following sea. Now, you're going along in a skiff in a following sea, like maybe in a 2-foot rolling sea or over a wake or something like that. If the bow of the boat goes down into the water and one side's up a little and the other side's down, it can kind of veer off to one side to the starboard of the port really quickly. It's dangerous, so what you want to do is be able to keep that boat up. I had told you before about the runners that we're going to put on the bottom. They haven't gone on there yet, but they will go on there. They help the boat stay tracking really nicely as well. But these things, what happens here is you get the bow of the boat in the water. Say you're doing 20 knots or 15 knots, whatever, and you dip the bow of the boat into the water. Well, this thing's almost 60 degrees right here, so what happens is the water speeds up on the side of the boat and it hits the bottom of these rails. It might be doing 30 knots right here when it hits the bottom of these rails. It has quite a major effect. It keeps the bow of the boat up so that it doesn't dive in and veer off to the port of the starboard, and that's why I call them lift rails. Now, people call them spray rails, and I think that's kind of cool, but they may cause more spray than they cure, so I call them lift rails, and I know they are effective.